Hey, Jeannette. Jeannette, I'm going to interrupt. We can't. Hey, yeah, we can't hear.
Haha. Okay, got it.
There you go.
Okay, let's try this again. Take two. Welcome to the 20th webinar of the month in our series of Lymphedema Awareness Month webinars. And today we're going to be talking about genital lymphedema. And our sponsored portion of the webinar will be by LNR USA. We have Bob Hartel, who is the Director of Clinical Education. And before we begin, oh, there he is. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the team. So if the rest of the team can come on to the scene, that would be great. We had, who you just saw, Erin telling me that my mic was muted. Erin right there, she will be asking me the questions today, helping me with the Q&A, and she is our marketing manager. Next to her and above her, next to me, is Jennifer Williams. She is our continuing education manager, and she'll also be helping out in the Q&A as well in terms of just making sure that the comments go into the chat and the cues come into the Q&As. And then we have Christy Blair, who you see just below me. She is our project manager. Thank you, ladies, for everything that you do. In addition to the three of these lovely ladies, we also have Veronica Senares, who is our social media manager. Oh, I already said this, didn't I? See, I forgot. Nicole Ballard, membership manager, and there's one more. I'm missing one more person.
Elisa?
Alyssa, NLN garment manager. Thank you so much. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get started with anatomy, just kind of going over it in a very geometric fashion, just to make sure that it is PG rated in case the younger audience comes by our website by chance. And then I'm going to show you some of the products that are available to assist with management. Briefly go over how you would go about self MLD, and then we'll open up to Q&A. All right, cool. Let me just bring this down here so I can show this to you. Okay. All right, so let me just make this a little bit louder so I can hear everybody. All right, so let's just first discuss like overall lymphatic drainage, right? I've done this in a couple of the other webinars, but perhaps they weren't relevant to you. And in case it's only this webinar session that is relevant to you, I'm going to, just go over this briefly here. So never mind my inability to do things with proportion. Okay, so basically in the body, we have 4 quadrants, and the division is basically directly up and down, dividing us from right to left. We also have from our belly button, another division that kind of comes up in a V, and there you have your 4 quadrants. Essentially, all of the lymphatic flow goes into, in the limbs and in the body, it goes into the axillary lymph nodes, the inguinal lymph nodes, and then in the head and neck, it kind of goes right into the final destination of drainage, which is in the venous angle over there. Okay, so the legs pretty much come up here into the inguinal lymph nodes here. Then they drain into what is called the lumbar trunks, which is which is part of the whole pelvic regional lymph nodes. And then you have the thoracic duct, which basically drains into the left side of the neck. The left arm drains into the left armpit. The right arm drains into the right armpit. From there, it goes into the venous angles. So if you just take a look at this, basically for the body, from the neck down, everything's divided into 4 quadrants. And you can see here that the left side of the neck takes care of 75% of the body, takes care of all of this. It additionally takes care of the left head and neck as well. So everything goes into the left neck from the left side of the body and the right lower leg. And the right head and neck and the right upper body, the right upper quadrant, including the right arm, goes into the right neck. Okay. So the important thing that we need to highlight for today's session is this part right here, where the genital region is also directly divided into right and left, right? So let's take a closer look at that. But let me just turn this around for you so that you can actually see that for a second. Okay, while I put this away, you can take that in. Okay. So now, for the genital region. So we're going to do this like in geometry terms, okay? So let's do the female first. So first we're going to do it where, let's say that's the labia minora, labia majora, and here's the thigh. And then here is the inguinal crease. Here's the hip. Okay, and here's the belly button, right? And here's the other inguinal crease. Okay, so basically, as I said, basically the body is divided into right and left, and it goes right down to the genital region. This is for the female, right? So female. I just did it, so I can't do it upside down. Not that that's really confusing. Okay, and then from here, basically drainage occurs into the inguinal lymph nodes. And as you can see, there isn't much of a distance, right? It's a very close, proximity for drainage to occur here. So basically, when we get ready to do drainage for the genital region, the most important things are the neck, which I had described over here, because especially the left side, but you figure you should always just be symmetrical. You do the neck. Then, because of the thoracic duct here in pink, you want to make sure that you do the entire midsection as well. And you do that with diaphragmatic breathing. And you also do that with abdominal MLD. And I'll show that briefly to you. And then you actually work and prepare the inguinal lymph nodes. Now, the inguinal lymph nodes, the reason why, the inguinal and or the pelvic lymph nodes are the very thing that probably was damaged, and most commonly through surgery. However, you're still going to drain this area because you never know what's left. For one thing, you might have some functioning lymph nodes left. They just might be overwhelmed. Or, drainage, even if these lymph nodes were all gone, right? Drainage, the drainage of the labia minora and majora, they still drain into this section here. Like the lymphatic pathways still lead into this area here. So we're still going to, give some manipulation to the inguinal lymph nodes. And then we're going to work everything up, right? So in the case of, especially if the entire region is affected, both right and left, basically, we're going to bring everything up into the armpits, right? So you work the right to the right, the left to the left, and then everything goes up into the armpits. From there, it goes back into the venous angle. So that's the female. But basically, the male is actually not much different, right? The only difference is obviously it requires a little bit more positioning. You have to be more mindful of the positioning when it's the male. So I'm just going to work off of this, and I'm just going to I'm going to defy, the typical colors that are used for a male, and I'm going to go with pink here. And so for the males, you're going to have the scrotum, right? Now, very often, I mean, in my clinical experience, what I have seen is that the scrotum by itself is usually what is more often swollen than the penis and the scrotum together. But you might. I mean, I would say that scrotal lymphedema accounts for about 75% of male genital lymphedema, and then 25% where it's penis and scrotum. And it's very rare that you'll see only penile lymphedema, I think. Again, that's my clinical experience, but it doesn't matter because, regardless of, where it's affected, you're going to see your lymphedema therapist and work with them, and they will help you. Okay, and then so for the penis, right, I'll just make that geometric. And then for the penis, what's going to happen is the same thing. The division will go straight down the scrotum and the penis, and lymphatic drainage will be such that it goes to the inguinal lymph nodes. The right goes to the right, and then for the penis, it basically comes up the shaft and then goes into the inguinal lymph nodes. Same thing on this side. The left goes to the left. And again, it's a short distance. It goes right into the inguinal lymph nodes. And then from there, same thing. We're going to work it where we bring it up on the right, and we also bring it up on the left. So it's very symmetrical in terms of drainage. So let's see. I think that's pretty much it. I think that the main message is just realizing that you can't just stop here into, like you can't just massage the genital region and then stop in the inguinal lymph nodes, because usually the inguinal and or the pelvic lymph nodes, right, which would be this, which drain over here. And again, here's the thoracic duct, and it goes back into the venous angle. So this, and or this would have all been damaged. So if you stop here, it's not necessarily going to drain, right? It'll just potentially collect in the suprapubic region. Because this is the area that's compromised in terms of the lymphatic system, you have to get it out of the region that's compromised. And the compromised region, in most cases, includes everything below the belly button, right? So all of this from the belly button down would be considered the compromised lymphatic region. So you have to work everything up beyond the compromised region, which means beyond the belly button, and bringing it into the upper quadrants so that drainage can actually occur. From there, it goes back into the lymph nodes that are functioning 100%, connected to the venous system, where it goes back into the circulatory system, and then of course everything is, processed through the renal system, and you pee it out. So on that note, what would be important for you to realize is that when you start MLD for any part of the body, especially the first few days and until everything normalizes, until drainage starts to occur on a more regular basis and on a quicker flow rate, that you're going to see increased urination. Now, depending on how long it's been that you've had the lymphedema, you are going to see like your urine be greater in volume. It might have a stronger odor. It might have a darker color. And so those are things that are not to be alarmed by. And it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's just simply more volume and that's it. But should you see any of the other things, it's usually not cause for concern. However, again, all of this should be monitored by your lymphedema therapist, by your medical team. And so if anything is totally out of the ordinary, you know, if you raise it with them, they'll be able to tell you whether or not anything that occurs is of concern. Okay, so I'm just going to show you very briefly what it could look like. Okay. All right, so the first thing would be to just take some diaphragmatic breaths, right? And what are diaphragmatic breaths? Basically, if you take a look here at my chest, right? Most people are breathing where their chest rises and falls. So it's like this. Throughout the day, right? And you're not necessarily activating the diaphragm. In order to activate the diaphragm, you actually have to see the lower part of your thorax rise and fall, because your diaphragm, which is actually sitting like an umbrella right at the bottom of your rib cage, when you're taking a nice deep breath and your diaphragm is activated, it's actually working so that it gets pulled down and it flattens. And so with that, the lower part of your abdomen rises. And then when you exhale, it comes back up into this, you know, relaxed position. So when you breathe in, it would look like this. Right? And without the diaphragm demonstration, it would look like this. You'll see that the upper chest is pretty much still until you've maximally inhaled, and in which case you'll just continue to have some chest expansion. But what you'll see first is you'll see the stomach kind of inflate. And then I'll show you in a profile view. So it's more like this. And as you can see, my chest didn't really move at all. So the first thing is always diaphragmatic breathing. It's always a great way to start anything. And it's also a great thing to do throughout the day. It helps to basically activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that is responsible for rest and digest and all the good things in the body. And it helps you to just have a more calm nervous system. Okay, so diaphragmatic breathing is the first thing. The next thing is to work on the neck, right? And let me just turn off this light. It makes it a little bit too bright. At some point when the sun sets, it'll be a little bit darker, and then I'll turn it back on. But here in the area above your clavicle, you have your neck, you have your clavicle, then you have the venous angle, right? You have it on both sides. And so basically you want to have your hand just nice and soft, and you basically just give a little pressure into the area above the collarbone. The lymph nodes that you're trying to work on are actually about 2 inches below the collarbone, but you can't work on it over here because you have the musculature in the way, the rib cage in the way. And so the most direct access is above the collarbone. And it's like so. Obviously, for the purposes of modesty, I have my clothes on, but when you're doing it at home, you would have, you would be basically completely naked, right? Especially when we're working on genital lymphedema. You do a little bit on the left side, because again, that's where all the drainage for the genital region will go. And you work a little bit on the right side. So then after that, it would be good to work on the abdominal lymphedema abdominal drainage as well. And, you know, it could be pretty complicated or it could be simple, depends on how your therapist will teach it to you. But in general, you kind of like start down here in the left lower quadrant. So if you basically divide your abdomen into 4 quadrants, start in the left lower quadrant, and then you just go clockwise. So left lower quadrant, and for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm just going to do like 3 strokes. but the true minimum is like 5 to 7. But I always just tell my patients to round it to 10 because you figure a couple of strokes won't be, exactly as it should be. So, and 10 is a lot easier to remember. You just keep that rhythm. And you work your way around the abdomen. So it's just above the inguinal crease. Then you work on the upper quadrant on the right of the abdomen. So this is the working hand, but of course, it feels a little bit asymmetrical. So I always like to use both hands, but this is like the helping hand. So this goes on top. It's not working as much, but it's giving a little bit of pressure so that I don't have to work so hard with just the one hand. And then right over the center, just going down. Everything kind of always just goes down because everything's going towards the belly button. And basically, we're going into the inguinal lymph nodes, right? And then from there, we're going to encourage it up into the venous angle. So here we are, we're in the center. And especially for those of you who have genital lymphedema, like actually this is like such an important area to work on that more than 10 repetitions is probably going to be warranted. It's going to be more like 15 minutes for this area because you want to create like a nice pathway on the inside of your body where it will just basically create like a lot of room for flow, and it will just kind of create a suction effect for your inguinal lymph nodes, pelvic lymph nodes, whatever might remain. And again, if they were all removed, we still have to drain this area, right? So we still have to create a suction for all of this to come up. So spending a lot of time in the abdomen will probably be important. It's very important to know that there are it's a long list of contraindications as to why you wouldn't work over the abdomen. And so you need to definitely be working with your healthcare team to make sure that you don't have one of those contraindications, in which case you should not be doing abdominal MLD. So this is like under normal circumstances where the compromise was simply of the pelvic and or inguinal lymph nodes, and there's no other complications in the picture. Okay, so just to recap, I did this, I did this, I did this, I'm here, and now I'm going to do over here, which is the left upper quadrant, and then I'm going to go down where I started. Okay, so to recap, done diaphragmatic breathing, right? Then we did venous angles, then we did the abdominal area. Okay. Great. So now what would really be great is to then clear the pathway even further on a superficial basis and basically prepare everything to come up into the axilla, right? So you're going to basically work on the axilla first. Nothing wrong with the lymph nodes over here, but we're going to make space. We're going to tell these lymph nodes, hey, I know that you're working, but let's just get rid of the current workload, whatever that might be, because we're going to give you a whole lot more. And you can do it where you work everything on the left side first and then everything on the right, or you can do it the way that I'm about to show it to you, which is left lymph nodes, right lymph nodes. Left upper quadrant, which is basically from the belly button up, but it's, remember I showed you that there was like a little bit of a V. So it's like kind of like a little higher in the rib cage. So it's like this. And you're just stretching your skin upward. And then the other side, going up. All of this is totally functional lymphatic regions, right? Then here's the belly button, it comes up in a V. I'm gonna now work basically on the lower quadrants. So now I'm going to do this actually fall in line a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna let my same-sided hand do the work. And at this point, you can even let both hands do the work. Then it's always good because, you know, the lymphatic system down here normally drains down into your inguinal lymph nodes. So you're asking it to do something new. So it's always a good idea to make sure that the fluid doesn't get confused, that you escort the fluid all the way to its final destination, which is the armpits, so that there is absolutely no confusion. Time. One more time. Okay, great. Then for the inguinal lymph nodes, basically, you can just do it at the same time because your hands will fall nice and neatly into the groove, into the inguinal crease. And you want to have maximum contact with your hand. In other words, you don't want to just like make it flat because I'm not flat right here, right? It's almost like this because I am falling right into that groove. And so my other fingers will be a little bit higher while my middle finger will be deep in the crease. At all times, you want to have maximum contact with the skin. And then from here, for women, basically, it's just the right goes to the right, the left goes to the left. So relative to the men, it's slightly easier because they're just less steps and you don't have to worry about positioning, right? But the men will have to worry about positioning a little bit more. And then after that, come back up, work it all the way up. Okay, so that's the female version. The male version of the self-MLG is all the same up until the genital part, of course. And I have here, just to kind of, I guess, simulate the male, is this lymph pad. This is the male genital lymph pad that LNR USA has, and they donated it for this demonstration. So you can imagine this is the scrotum and then this is the penis, right? So for the men, what you have to do is you have to first of all worry about positioning, right? So you have to, like for the females, you just have to be comfortable, and usually you're lying down, and when you're lying down, your feet are slightly up so that you can have access. You don't want to be completely flat, because if you're completely flat, then you don't have access into your inguinal crease as much. So with your legs slightly bent or your hips slightly bent, you'll be able to have more access deep into the inguinal lymph nodes, right? Okay, for the men, similarly, where you want to have like a little bit of slack on your hip, you don't want to be completely straight, nor do you want to be where you're bent 90 at the hips, because then you're totally going to close everything off. So you have to like basically be in a semi-reclined position, comfortably lying down. But also for the genital region, what you'll want to do is you'll want a little bit of assistance, because you know, the most comfortable position for the hips are where they're open. So that's kind of like out, and you're also like kind of allowing your feet to kind of like go out to the side a little bit, as opposed to being totally straight and as opposed to being totally out to the side. So just having it open in a V is allowing the hips to be in the most comfortable position. And that's what your body will naturally do when you're totally relaxing, right? The men will have to like have a little bit of like support underneath the scrotum so that you can have access to the scrotum. Otherwise it'll fall down and you'll have to always like constantly pull it up. And it's just a little bit more effort than it needs to be. So then imagine that this is like a towel here, right? You basically bring up the scrotum, you put a towel underneath so that the scrotum stays up and elevated a little bit, right? So that's the first thing. Then, so for the men, you do the same thing, the diaphragmatic breathing, the neck, the armpits, coming up the side, oh, and the abdominal lymphedema, right? Then you do the inguinal crease. And then the scrotum is actually closer to the lymph nodes. So you would actually work on the scrotum first. And basically you would hold the scrotum fully with both hands, having full contact. And basically the right goes to the right, the left goes to the left. And because the skin is like right next to each other, and plus you also need a little bit of support, like by having the other hand giving you some counter pressure, it's one side at a time. So here, the right, if you want to do only the right first for like a period of time, so the left hand is holding the left scrotum, and then the right goes into the right inguinal crease. Or you do an alternate way where it's left, right, left, right, left, right. And for, at least 10 repetitions. But again, if you have scrotal lymphedema, I would say you need like 10 minutes for just the scrotum alone, right? Okay, so that's the scrotal piece. But, depending on the extent of the lymphedema, you might need to actually do a little bit more like fine tuning, where it's not just this gross motor, MLD. You might actually have to get a little bit towards the perineum as well, and you kind of bring it up. So if you have more perineal swelling as well, you'll have to get your hands underneath, and then you pull up, right to the right, left to the left. And this is for the women too. If you have perineal swelling as well, you bring it up towards the inguinal lymph nodes. All right, and then the scrotum. Right, okay. Now for the penis, you'll have to definitely you'll have to find out how it's most comfortable. Now the thing to know about the penis is that, again, like I said, more often than not, you'll see that there's more scrotal edema than penile and scrotal edema. So what happens is that with the scrotum being swollen, but the penis not being swollen, it kind of gets lost in the scrotum. That happens a lot. And so in these cases, right, you really only have to worry about the part that's swollen, because getting access to the penis is going to be difficult until the scrotal edema is well managed. But when you do have the 25% of the cases where you have penile lymphedema and scrotal lymphedema, then you just have to make sure that you position the penis well, where you have, support. And basically you want to have like as much contact with the working hand as possible. So if we're doing the right side of the penis, again, the left hand is totally supporting the penis on the left while the right hand is working. And so you might have to basically, depending again how large the penis is, you might have to divide it into sections. So the longer the penis is, the better that you would basically divide it, where you work closest to the scrotum first. So you work at the base first, and then you work towards the tip. But basically you're stretching the skin in a C-like motion, where you're going to open up the lymphatics and then tell it the direction in which it should go, which is towards the inguinal crease, right? So again, we're at the base, doing a bunch of C's with as much surface area contact with the working hand as possible. Then the midsection, and then the head. And of course, all this fluid could always use a good reminder as to where it should go. So after doing this, and again, I would argue the scrotum should be done for at least 10 minutes, the penis by itself for 10 minutes, but the minimum in each area that you're manipulating, it's 5 to 7. That's the true minimum. But if you really want to like see drainage, then you would spend a little bit more time. Okay. So then you work your way back up so that you escort the fluid all the way to its final destination. Then you work on the inguinal crease. Then you bring it up. and then you end with diaphragmatic breathing. Oh, sorry, 1 second. It's the other way. Breathing in, it comes down, and you breathe out, the diaphragm comes up, and then the neck. All right. So we're 37 minutes in, and that was MLD. Erin, do we have any questions about the manual lymphatic drainage portion?
It's not a specific question to manual lymph drainage, and it's a general question, as in, why is this not taught in med school? It's incredibly sophisticated and necessary. It should be part of their trainings and teachings, etc. The drawings are most appreciated and essential to study. And so also a kudos to Professor Jeannette. But basically, why is this not taught? What can we do?
You know, it's such a great question, and it's a little bit of a mystery. You know, I mean, I guess what we could say is, and I hate to really say this because it implies that we're still such a young field, but the truth is that we're the latest field out of all the other medical specialties, right? Like cardiac, you know, care was discovered much earlier and things like that. So like the lymphatic system was like, because it was so small and delicate, we didn't have the imaging available to discover until technology was able to catch up. And so, you know, I want to say that that's the reason why, but I don't know why it's not a bigger part of the medical education, but I'll tell you that I do have a vision in making that so, where it is at least more than 2 hours of medical education within the entire time that a doctor, you know, studies. And, you know, just for now, you know, we'll take every patient's help in terms of just spreading the word to their medical teams, you know, but it's an effort that we have plans for. It's just that we had to do it in steps. The goal for this year is to get updated position papers, which I've said throughout the webinar. So we're going to update our position papers on diagnosis, training, treatment, nutrition, surgery, and a couple of others. And so we're working on that. And I figured that is the most impactful because we need to help patients right now, right? We need to like set some guidelines so that everybody can at least have a minimum standard of care. And then after that, we'll get into the medical schools and we'll try to get it right at the source so that everybody can then be well informed, and then that will have a nice triple and ripple effect. So thank you so much for that comment, whoever that came from. Very much appreciated.
I have one thing that we're looking at your belly during your answers, but that's okay. If you want to move your camera up or not.
No, I'm okay with that because you know why?
You're not done.
I didn't bring my makeup today.
Okay.
So I'm gonna let you just see my body.
But we do have another question.
Okay.
And this is asking, so do you direct the MLD of the penis to its tip, not to the base and then towards?
Oh, no, definitely not. To the base. To the base. Because this is what I always say to everybody, right? It's like when you're doing, like when you think about like MLD for the hand, let's say, you know, like some people, they bring it towards the tip of their fingers, but where is the lymphedema going? It's not coming out from the tips into the air and coming out like it's shooting, you know, it's all the drainage, even though the lymph nodes were affected here in the armpit, the drainage still occurs up the arm into the area that has been compromised. But from there, we bring it into areas that can manage that extra fluid. So for the penis, absolutely, definitely not into the tip. You're not peeing that lymphatic fluid out. That would be actually kind of nice, right? If you can do that. I mean, actually, in the end, you are doing that, but not directly. It has to go through the entire system and be processed first, right? But from the tip, you have to bring it down to the base. Then from there, it goes into the inguinal lymph nodes, and depending on how your anatomy is, like, you know, you then have to like might you might have to, like if your penis is kind of like stuck within and hidden within the scrotum, then you'll have to do the scrotum first, because that's all where it's kind of draining towards, and then go into the inguinal crease. But no, definitely not towards the tip. It goes down to the base, towards the inguinal lymph nodes, the scrotum to the inguinal lymph nodes. Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And of course, Fenton says you're beautiful with or without makeup, and we all agree.
Thank you, Fenton. I love you too. Okay, so now what I want to show you is, some of the different things that you can do for managing with compression. This is definitely not an all-inclusive, demonstration. The thing with lymphedema in general is that it's a lot of trial and error. So allow that process to happen with your lymphedema therapist. But I want to move this out of the way now. Okay, so right here, I have the male genital pad and I have the female genital pad. As you can see, there is this big section over here that goes in the front to cover the suprapubic region. Super important because, like I said, the lymphatic drainage is compromised from the belly button down. So you want to escort that fluid all the way up to just above that watershed, just above your belly button. So this is the female genital pad. It goes into the perineal area. And so like right now I'm wearing like gym shorts. You can wear something similar. You can have your underwear on, you can have gym shorts, or you can have like pantyhose, like just nylon stockings. Then this goes on top. And then this is like bike shorts where you then have compression on top of this. Okay. All right. So this is a little bit longer than I need it to be, but I'm definitely not going to worry about it. I'm just going to cover it with my shirt. Right. But the bike shorts is the point where the compression ends, right? So it's right there. Now, I will tell you that there is not a whole lot of compression here with the bike shorts alone. And what I often do, allow me to just get this really quickly. I forgot to get the wider bandage. Let me just grab this here. Aha. Okay. So you can open that one. All right. My daughter is here with me in the clinic, and she might want to show her face at some point in time. So I just had to tell her that she can open up that bottle of seltzer if she wanted to. Okay, so not a whole lot of compression here. So what I often do is I tell my patients that they can actually bandage with, the lymph pad underneath and everything, giving them nice compression. And then they basically just go ahead and they cover their hips and, the anterior pelvic region with an additional bandage. So, I think most people have sufficient flexibility to do this where they can just like stand and do this. But if you don't, I'll show you how to take care of this in a second. But you can actually control like the compression that you apply from bandaging. And what I mean by that is I don't really need a whole lot on the butt area, right? Because that's not where my lymphedema is. And so the lymphedema, if it's in the genital region, in the pubic region, then what I can do is as I come across the front, I pull quite a bit more, never 100%, but relative to the rest of the application, I pull a little bit more. So now there's more compression here. And then as I go over here, I'm just like kind of like, letting it hook onto my hip and my butt, but not really pulling on it. So that in the end, it's kind of comfortable in the back, but the front has more compression, right? Now let's just say you're not as flexible where you can bring your arms all the way to the back. So then what you can do is if you're on a chair, You come around, you put it as far back as you can go, and you kind of just sit on it, and then you switch hands. Same thing, where you can sit on it, and you switch hands. And you really only need to like cover it over here, but of course you can kind of come up a little bit more so that you can kind of use your hip bones to kind of like hook onto everything. But you don't want to go beyond that, because we're not really focusing on the belly, right? We're focusing on the genital region. And so that would be that. Now, this is just to basically, give compression right over here. And this will be very effective for males, especially if this is, you have the scrotum covered underneath here and the penis as well. For the females, you really need a little bit more compression, like right in between. And so it's a little bit more difficult to do that, to achieve that with bandaging, but this will still help, because if you really build up the foam underneath, this will give some compression and you'll be able to feel that. So now this is really meant for like when you're at home, and this is best like when you're kind of, not going to be worried too much about like flexing your legs too much, because you'll see what happens here is that if you sit down like this, it kind of just bundles up a little bit. So this is really more for like when you are able to be a little bit more reclined. So if you do have a chair, let me just grab this here for you. Using this chair for this light. And then basically, I don't know how to like, let's try here. But let me just show you in terms of positioning, so I don't have to show you about the chair. But if you can allow your hips to be more extended so that you're not sitting like this and your hips are 90, it'll be a little bit more comfortable if you were going to use the bandaging, right? And of course, if you're lying down, then that's great. So you won't have to worry about it so much. As long as you're able to keep the structure of this bandaging, as you can see, I kind of like did a couple of moves and, it's still in place. It didn't like ride up, then you're good. So you won't have to worry as much. But if let's say your abdomen was a little bit bigger, like I always say, I've been saying throughout the webinars, is that if you have an hourglass shape, so if you have a bigger belly, then relatively speaking, just below the belly, right where you need the compression, it's going to want to just slide down over the belly and into the more narrow part. But if your belly is relatively flat, then, you can get away with doing something like this. So it's, again, that's why there's just so many things to consider. And that's why it's so important for you to work with your lymphedema specialist. Okay. All right. So,
Jeannette, quick question. What is the name of the female padding?
Oh, yeah. So it's basically just the female genital lymphedema pad by LNR USA. And then this is the male genital lymphedema pad. And it would be the same idea where you would wear, I would say for the men, when you're doing this, it's better to wear briefs as opposed to boxer briefs, because then you can allow for things to just be a little bit more clean in terms of the profile. Because if you wear boxer briefs and if you have swelling in your leg and swelling in your abdomen and swelling in the penis and scrotum, then it will want to just collect in the crease. It'll just ride up. So wearing briefs will be better. Then you put this on. Then you put on some compression shorts. These are just, regular bike shorts, but you can have like, something made for you, but for the purposes of active reduction, just like nice compression bike shorts will do. And then you would do the same thing that I just demonstrated with the bandaging, and it will definitely help with the male genital lymphedema a little bit more effectively than the female. Okay. Now, what I'd like to also show you is some other things. So obviously this is really big, right? Very visible, and you might not want to have that throughout the day, especially if you're, not working from home and going into the office or going out. So for the females, LNR USA has like this female genital pad. We're on the one side, I can, when Bob comes on, he can tell me what this material is, but it has this material on the one side where it has a little bit more traction and friction. So that's the side that's meant to go on like the pants so that it'll stay instead of it sliding all over the place. And then there's the softer, like cottony side that comes upward. So for the females, you'll have your underwear on, right? And then you put this pad in place. Everything's black, so it's really hard to see, but you can kind of see the gray there. And then you pull up your shorts or, or compression stockings or compression waist ties, whatever it might be. And then that will give a little bit of compression right in the area where you need it. Now, those are products. And again, very big disclaimer, the NLN does not necessarily endorse any product that we are showing. It is just some of these products are available for you for these very purposes. And we thought it was important for you to connect with them just so that, with our sponsors, so that you know what your options are. But we do not endorse any product. It's just for your general knowledge. So I don't know how much this costs, but Bob will definitely let us know once he comes on. But you can make these things, right? So here is a Comprex 2 foam. And basically, you can just if you get a whole sheet, the whole sheet, again, I don't know exactly, but I want to say it's like maybe $100, maybe $150, but it will last you a really long time, especially if it's for the female. But basically, all you have to do is just cut what you need. Right? And then, and also, so I just cut one layer. However, let's just say you were really swollen. You can actually cut a whole lot more. And this is called Comprex 2. Just so happens to also be available from LNR USA. And then you basically just roll this up so that it's thicker. And then you put it under the shorts. So here are the shorts, put it underneath. And it feels, I think it feels really good. I think compression in general is just something that everybody needs. And it just cushions the whole area. And so, especially if you have like big thighs like me, it'll just give it a little bit extra, compression in there, right? So, so this is Comprex 2. Now, there are some people who, and the thing about this too, this is Comprex 2, it's a soft foam, but it has these lines. These lines are kind of cool because it kind of gently breaks up any fibrosis that you might have, any like hardened tissue. And obviously you can make it as, thick or as thin as you'd like. So that's a great thing. But for some people who have like significant fibrosis, you actually might need a more dense foam. So you can see here, this is orange Comprex foam, and it's a lot more dense than this. And so with this, you would do something similar. So for this demonstration, I mean, you know what, it doesn't take too much time for me to cut out a female pad. So, but you get the idea. All you do is you cut out the shape that you need. And the important thing with anything that is very dense, oops, I'm sorry, you don't see it. The important thing with anything that's really dense is that you need to cut those corners and bevel it. And so this is what it looks like. You have to make it so that the edges are not sharp. Otherwise it digs in and it creates like these red marks. Right, so now you can see that it kind of like goes down to the side. I'm gonna do it over here. Slope it. Slope all edges. right? And which side do you think is going to go against the skin? Just think to yourself what you would do, right? But basically, it's the flatter side, right? Because you don't want this like digging into your skin. You want it to be nice and flat in terms of what's going to be on you, right? This, like that, right? Now, the great thing about like getting these large sheets of foam is that you can make it however shape, whatever shape you want, right? So if you wanted a little bit more coverage, then you would cut this orange foam, or you would cut this spaghetti foam, which is what sometimes we call it, so that it is the shape of this, right? So you can just use this as a pattern. And then you can basically have coverage that way too. So that's another idea. And one other thing that I want to show you, so these are like just like different foam inserts that you would use. And I showed you the bandaging. Now allow me to just go over how you might bandage if you were a guy. Okay, so I'm gonna use this tissue paper to fill up the scrotum. And what I'm gonna bring over here is Translast Classic, also available from NLN USA. And then a short stretch bandage here, Coban tape, which is not an adhesive, it's just a self-stick material. And what's typically used in this area for bandaging is something that's a little bit more of a medium stretch. The short stretch is a little bit rougher, so it can be too rough for the genital region. So this one is something that is like not as elastic as an ACE bandage, but not as short of a stretch as the short stretch bandage. So this is called Lancolast. And it's just a little bit more soft against the skin, and it molds a little bit easier. So, okay. Now. All right. So here's my scrotum. Now, what I would like to say is, I think bandaging of the penis and scrotum is super hard because it's not like this, you know, fabric here where there is this texture of cotton to hold the materials in place, right? It's a lot more, it's more like chasing a rainbow when you're bandaging the scrotum and penis. It moves, the fluid shifts so quickly that sometimes you'll bandage and you think you're done, and you get your pants on and the whole thing just falls off because it was like so effective in terms of like getting the swelling down. It's really hard to keep things in place. It's not like the leg, right, where you have your bones and you have your muscles that give it constant, you know, structural integrity. The scrotum and penis, it's like as soon as you get a little bit of the swelling down, the whole thing just comes off. Now, that doesn't mean it always is the case, but I'll just say it's very challenging, just to say the least, okay? Okay, but let's just do this. So the important thing when you are bandaging for the penis is that you don't simply take advantage of the columnar aspect of the penis. In other words, what a lot of people do, because it's just easier, is they simply go around like this and neglect the head altogether because it's hard to get into that bandaging. So they bandage the whole penis, the whole shaft, and totally neglect the head. And sometimes people think also that it'll make it easier to urinate, but that's not necessarily the case. Basically what will happen, just as I said with the hand, with the toes and with the fingers, is if you only bandage from the knuckles up, you're going to have more swollen fingers. And so it's no different with the penis. If you only bandage from here and neglect the head will become more swollen. So you need to cover it So basically the way that you do that is you do like anchor over here, just below the head, but you do want to start to cover the head as well. So you go like this, right? So here, instead of going straight across, I'm going to come up and cover a portion of the head, round again to anchor. Then the next time I come around, I'm going to get the other side. Let's camera a little closer. I'm going to capture the other side. So here, what you would be tempted to do is just to go straight across. You can see here how I covered a portion of the head over here. And now on this side, you're going to cover the other side of the head. So as you can see, I'm doing a good job. I still have the very center here to worry about, but then I'll take care of it the next pass. And in order for that to be a little bit more smooth, you'll need a little bit more of an angle from a little bit like closer to the base. In other words, what I mean is it's hard if you stay so close to the head and then go right for it, because it's not in real life. You don't have all of this like, you know, so structured. And what will happen is if you're so close to the head and you make this turn, it'll just come right off, right? So what you need is to have a little bit more of a line closer to the base, and then you have an extension that will then now cover the head. In order for that to happen, you can't pull too much because it'll just want to like become ropey. But basically you pull and now you cover the head. And then now where do you go from there? You can kind of choose. You can kind of go, well, like I said, with the finger bandaging, whichever direction you go, you should always continue. And in general, that would be the same here. So I've been going clockwise. So now if I continue over here, ideally, you would just continue clockwise. So now here's the other side. I'm going to show you again, just covering the head. I'm going to continue to loop around, and you want to like come back a little bit closer to the base and make sure you hook it. Hook it meaning like you want to make sure that this turn, which is like pretty much like parallel to the shaft, right? It has to stay secured. So here I am, I'm going to come down. As you can see, this turn is pretty much parallel to the, shaft. So you're going to have to come down and you have to basically anchor this entire turn. So in other words, here, I'm going to cover this. I'm going to cover this so that that last turn that was pretty much parallel doesn't just fall off, right? And then you cover it over here. And so now I have some coverage over the head. And I just did one turn. It's very sensitive over here, but if it needs more compression and a little bit more layers, you just repeat, right? So allow me to do that for you. If it's enough, after this, you just basically go down towards the base. But if it's not, you repeat. And so I'm going to repeat at least a couple of turns here for you. So I'm going to do this right side of the head, come down. The left side of the head, come down. Then I'm going to do the very center one more time. And then, like I said before, if this is now parallel to the shaft, you're going to have to secure this entire bandage. So you go around, but this time I want to end a little closer to the base because with my next bandage, I want to be able to cover it. But if that doesn't happen, that's okay, not to worry too much. So in other words, you start by the head and then you work your way down towards the base. And that way you can continue. Okay. So I'm going to do one more. So here's my end. I would not worry about taping this because you're going to basically cover it with the next roll. So here's the next roll. And remember what I did for the upper extremity and the lower extremity bandaging. This same thing applies here, where if you were to hold the bandage and you think of it like a snail, let's say this is the snail's shell, right? You want it to be right side up. And that means that as you're applying it over the penis, the snail's shell is right side up, as opposed to being upside down. Because now if the snail is upside down, every time you turn around the penis, it's going to get longer and longer, and it's going to be much more difficult to manage. You'll have to constantly bring the bandage back in. So you need to have it so that the snail is right side up. And wherever my last bandaging ended, you have to always cover that. That's just a rule for any bandaging. So I'm going to start over here a little bit closer to the head, make sure I cover that end of the last bandage, and then work my way towards the base. Now, same rule applies with the limb bandaging, where ideally you would have more compression by the tip, by the head, and as you come down closer to the base towards the scrotum, a little bit less. So we had a lot of layers over here by the tip. So as we come up, whatever I use is going to be sufficient. So depending on how you feel with bandaging, in other words, how complicated you can get with the skill of bandaging, like you can basically just constantly go around where you're going around in a spiral. So every turn, it overlaps the last turn a little bit more, and you keep working towards the base, right? You can see that I just kept working every turn closer and closer to the base. But you can also, especially since the penis needs so much more structure, that I would actually suggest, if you can manage, you work with your therapist to learn how to do the herringbone pattern, the figure 8 pattern. Now, again, you know, all of this might be a moot point because, you know, there might not be a whole lot of structure here because, again, you know, you just have to like work with what you've got. But if you have enough, then basically this pattern is such that you go up, and I say up, I should really say down because it's down towards the base, thinking that the penis is like standing and protruding, right? But let's forget about up and down. Forgive me. Let me just say, you're going to go towards the base, towards the scrotum. And then after that, you're going to go straight across the other side. Then if I went towards the scrotum this way, for this next turn around on this side of the penis, I'm going to come up towards the head. Then straight across the other side. Then when I come around this side again, I'm going to go down towards the base, towards the scrotum. Straight across the other side. Then this time up towards, this time towards the head. So basically what happens is that you have this crisscross pattern, right? And in case it's not very clear, I'm going to show you another bandage on my arm, just so that it's more clear. But I'm just going to use this roll up and pretty much like done here, right? And then now you have the scrotum to worry about. I would cut this piece here because the scrotum will be another entity that you have to worry about. But, and it's going to be difficult to have this like connected, but if it's possible, you can give it a try. But basically what happens here is that you would, so I take it back. I said I was going to cut it, but I'm not. But basically you would continue, if you're able to now make a base around, to make several turns around the base of the scrotum, because you need an anchor, right? So now I'm creating my anchor. I'm pretty much going to use this all up. You know, you can tape it if you like, but I really don't even think that that's necessary. But now the next thing that I would like to suggest that you consider is you need something that really gives it more structure. So, and something to hold on to, because again, with everything being so easily changed in terms of size and volume. So to hold the last bit of bandaging in place, I'm going to use this Coban. And it's not an adhesive material, but it does stick on itself. So I'm going to use this to kind of like create an anchoring point for the entire scrotum. So you definitely want to get it so that it's at, you know, the anchor that you had created, which is around the base of the scrotum. You go all the way around, but after you're able to have the material like become self-adhesive and it's now touching, you've taken care of the base of the scrotum. Now you want to try to get a little bit of this material on other parts of the scrotum as well. So now it doesn't have to be with this continuous piece here, right? Let me show you. I'm just going to use it up, but it doesn't have to be with this continuous piece, but you can basically maneuver this in a way where you cover the entire scrotum. And so now I cover it here. And anything that's extra, like, let me show you here. See, like, in order for me to have covered this part of the scrotum, which is closer to the base of the penis, I had to like angle in such a way where this was extra. No big deal, because this material is self-adhesive. So all I do is I pinch this and I bring it down and then I smooth it and it now covers the whole scrotum. So that's the great thing about having Coban being like an anchoring point, because then now from here, you can be a little bit more secure in your bandaging, right? But what I meant to say was, you know, let's just say that I didn't have enough to do what I just did. The great thing is that you can get some more Coban. And you can work this in strips. So you can do this, right? Let's say I didn't need so much. So let's say I didn't even need this much. I'm going to cut this down the length. And then basically, let's say I needed more coverage here at the base. What I can do is just add this piece separately to really lift and position everything as I would like for it to be, right? Because it's self-adhesive. And then same thing on this side. If I wanted more support right over here, I do that as well, right? And then now I have a little bit more traction for when I add my Lencolast to like actually hold on and hook onto the scrotum, right? So it's going to look like this. So you go around the base again, and now I have an anchor. And same thing, right? This is a medium stretch bandage, but whatever the inherent elasticity is, it doesn't matter. You're not going to take up full stretch. You're going to basically, you know, give it a gentle stretch. Not too much, not too little. And you want to get to the entire scrotum, right? So you're going to have to like change the angle of your turns. So as you can see, the last time it came around this way, this time I'm going to come around this way. And I might do that one more time, but now I'm going to anchor this turn. So just go straight across the base. And then now I want to try to get to this part here. Come around down. And then, you know, not neglecting this side either. So you can see I didn't really kind of give any love over here. So I'm going to go straight across this way. And then straight across this way. And then pretty much done, right? And then what you can always do is, so I'm just gonna pretend like I cut it here because this is all I need, right? And then you can basically use this Coban again to secure the ending of your bandage so that you don't have to worry about the adhesive, because once adhesive goes onto this, when you try to take it off, it becomes really messy. So you can use this Coban at the end to just secure everything in place. Right? And then that's your bandaging, right? So now imagine that I'm not using the genital pad and you did this for active reduction. Then this whole, like what you would put on top of this would be the shorts, right? So you can imagine that if this was actually your anatomy, then you can then put your underwear on top, the briefs, and then you wear your compression shorts to hold everything in place. And that's that. And we are so over time. I need to end it here, but does anybody have any questions about that?
So there are a couple questions. In your experience, would gray foam be too strong versus the Comprex 2?
Well, the gray foam is actually of a lower density. Oh, I see, the Comprex 2. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it depends. I wouldn't say it's much. The density is not much difference. It's just like how thick it is. So especially if you got like the, let's see, where is it? If you used, let's see, I have it here somewhere. If you use the 1/4 inch foam, which I actually don't have here, but if you use the 1/4 inch foam, which is like half this thickness, then it's not much different than using the Comprex 2, right? I would even argue that using the Comprex 2, because it's like textured, is relatively more aggressive. But but because it's soft, it's really not that aggressive. But if you had to compare it between this and the flat, like 1/4 inch foam, it's very comparable in terms of the foam density. But comparing it to the thickness of a Comprex foam, that's definitely different. This is definitely more aggressive than Comprex 2 or the gray foam.
Okay, and also a question always meant to be asked, why are the genital pads not chevron channels?
I'll let Bob answer that. I think, Bob, do you have an answer for that?
I've never been asked that before. Probably because, because of the orientation of the lymph flow. I mean, going back to the initial diagram that Jeannette drew for us. But we do make custom ones, and we have made custom chevron channeled ones for patients if that's what's needed. Obviously, the chevron would mainly be at the abdominal portion of the pad. It would be pretty hard to do little tiny chevrons, especially on the female pad, because the female pad is only about 3.5 inches wide max. The male is wider, and as you saw, it's got a seam so that it encases the male genitalia better. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but we can definitely make one if you want one that way.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And also, remember that the idea anyway is to bring the fluid up beyond the watershed of the umbilicus and the belly button and get it into the areas where drainage can occur, and that's above the belly button. So just bringing it up into the intact quadrants, the part of your torso that's working just fine in terms of lymph drainage is usually the idea. So that's another possible explanation. But, again, I'll leave that to Bob to research and get back to you on. Okay, any other questions before I hand it over to Bob?
Only one question, where to buy them? And I'm thinking maybe Bob can help with that.
Yes,
I can.
Indeed. So with that, I'm going to introduce Bob Hartel. He's the Clinical Education Director, or the Director of Clinical Education for NLN USA. This is a sponsored portion of today's webinar. And thank you so much, Bob, for your magenta support. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Well, Jeannette really thank you so much for covering all these items. In fact, my presentation was going to cover a lot of the items that have already been shown. So I think rather than spending a lot of time on presentation, I will show you a couple of slides. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to a couple. Let me see if I can just share my screen. I think I should be able to. There we go. So I think there were, in talking about the different foams, one thing I want to clarify, and I think Jeannette did a great job, but there are closed cell foams and open cell foams. Open cell foam is what's in Comprex 2. And actually, it's not a universal given in foam, but normally the lighter the color, the less dense the foam is. So normally white foam is less dense than green foam or gray foam in open cell foams. And the Comprex sheet that Jeannette was showing, the orange, that's a closed cell foam. So as Jeannette said, that's much more aggressive because open cell foam compresses easily and closed cell foam does not compress so easily. And we also make a Comprex roll that's a white closed cell foam. I know everything's named Comprex. I apologize. The Germans named all this stuff. So I know it's hard to keep it straight sometimes. And of course,
That is so funny, Bob.
I know, and a lot of other manufacturers use COMP2 in their prefixes for their products. So I apologize for the naming scheme, but yeah. So the white Comprex 2 channel foam is probably the least aggressive as far as any type of foam. The nice thing about the Comprex 2, and I'll just mention this quickly, is that it is machine wash and dryable, and it does stay together. And a lot of open cell foams you can't wash all that easily, but because this is in that polyester scrim, you can wash and dry it up to 50 times, which is really nice. And I did look up pricing while we were talking. I just wanted to make sure we had current pricing. So a full sheet of Comprex 2 retails for about $59. And when somebody asked where you can buy these, you can buy them on all of the major websites that sell various lymphedema products and garments and supplies. So in no particular order, that would be Compression Guru, Lymphedema Products, Bright Life Direct, Bandages Plus, Academy Bandages, High Tide Medical. Those are the major. Absolute Medical is a little smaller online. They're in Chicago. So those are all places that you can buy them. And sometimes if you're in an area that has a DME that handles bandaging products, they might have them available to you locally too. And then the other thing that, thank you so much for going into Lencolast to such a great extent. I was just going to mention that it's great for genital swelling. And of course, not only do we have Lencolast, but we also have a product called Ideal Binda that is like a lighter weight, but it's a shorter stretch. But this would be really good too. And I think that you might have had this, although it looked like it was a different color, Jeannette, when you were showing how to bandage around your abdomen, your lower abdomen and up. And this can work really well for that too, because it's a little lighter than regular short stretch bandage. But
I actually was showing the short stretch for the abdomen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that's great. It's a great other alternative.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. And then just to mention, because we talked about Comprex, which was the orange foam, that runs about $32 a roll online approximately. And then I know there were some questions about swell spots, and we focused on these. Now we've changed the name on them. And this used to be called the Sweet Spot, which I thought was a really good name, but that was what Kathy had named it, but we've renamed it the Female Genital Pad. And exactly what you described, Jeannette, that has a non-skid kind of surface on it, and it's also fluid resistance. So it helps to keep the pad from soaking through if there is any moisture that comes out. And then the male is called the scrotum pad now, and the female is called the labia pad. We used to call them the male and female genital, but either way, either one of the genital pads, the labial or scrotal, is about $62 online. This small pad, the female genital pad, is about $20, and the oval pad is about $25. So just to give you some idea of price on those. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, we do have the full line of Tribute Night custom nightwear and foamwear. And this type of product we can make in virtually any configuration. So for instance, if you look at this bike short here in the lower center, we've made all sorts of different bike shorts for people. And here's an extreme example. I know, Jeannette, I've mentioned this patient to you before, but we had a 13-year-old girl entering adolescence down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. She had Crohn's from birth, so she had an indwelling ostomy port and bag. And then she started developing lymphedema, so her hips were really getting much, much larger. And then with the decreased fluid flow, then she developed lymphedema in her genitalia right as she was entering puberty. So we made a custom pair of bike shorts that had an ostomy port around the back for her bag. We put a special pouch for her genitalia, and we actually put some small straps on there so she could adjust it. And then we did a zipper up the front. The legs were longer. And then we also put adjustable Velcro pads so she could get the garment up and over the top of her hips, since she had lipedema. And of course, the characteristic in that is that you get the really broad hips with a regular, a normal size waist, basically. So the tribute night can literally be made in any configuration for that part of the body or any part. And of course, the tribute night has a full year warranty. We'll adjust the garment anytime in the first 45 days to make sure it fits properly. So obviously this is a difficult area to kind of fit a garment to. So we definitely will adjust the garment until it fits. And then anytime in the first year, we'll take it in if the garment becomes too large over time. So, which is a good thing because that means you're decreasing. So just a close up of these garments. We can do farmer johns like this too. And if there's pannus involvement, we also do a separate abdominal binder that has a big Velcro adjustable pad across the front of the abdomen to make it easier to get onto. And of course, chevron or vertical channeling, we've already discussed that. Chevron channeling for secondary lymphedema normally, and vertical channeling for primary. But this, we can do a combination of channeling in a garment like this if we want to have both chevron and vertical channeling. And then our two different heights. And foam technology, we've talked about that already. So really, I'd rather field any other questions that you might have. If anything else has popped up, I'd be happy to answer.
It looks like we don't, but you know what we can do though, Bob, is LNR USA is generously giving away a genital pad.
Yes.
And is that female and or male, or like one of each?
Whatever people want. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you are interested in receiving a female genital pad and a male genital pad, please raise your hand. And we are going to see if there aren't too many names, in which case one of our amazing team members will put it into the wheel of names, and then we'll just spin and we'll take it from there. But for all of you who raised your hand, if you can please take a look at Christy Blair's email address at the bottom of the chat there. Please do make note of her email address, because you'll have to connect with her in order to receive the giveaway. And then there was also one question in terms of what do you do if you cover the head in terms of urination? And the answer to that is that basically men who have to do genital bandaging will have to become very proficient and efficient at doing the genital bandaging, so that when it is time to go to the to the bathroom, that you unwrap everything and you quickly put everything back on, right? But again, it might be the case that if the man is like 25% of the cases where it's penile lymphedema and scrotal lymphedema, you might be able to basically only undo just the penile part and then leave the scrotal part intact, and then just rebandage the penile part, very quickly. If it's such that it's in the majority of cases where it's mostly scrotal lymphedema and the penis kind of gets embedded or hidden a little bit, then you really only had the scrotal edema to begin with. The scrotal bandaging to begin with. And it's a little bit tricky, but basically you would hold the scrotum so that the penis comes out and then you can urinate. It can be very messy, and in many cases you'll have to worry about rebandaging the scrotal bandaging anyway. So it's going to be something that you'll have to work closely with your specialist in order to figure it out. And of course, with like everything else, you'll figure out over time what works best for you as the patient. The other thing, while we're giving some time for the names to be entered, that I'd like to definitely highlight is this, and it's super important. We're not going to talk about it in full detail, but if you have any dysfunction with bowel and bladder, sexual dysfunction, whether you have like pain with intercourse, whether you are unable to have intercourse, like let's say you're a female and because of the radiation, the opening of the vagina is so small that, you're afraid to have intercourse, or if you have like incontinence of any kind, if you have anything wrong with the bowel and bladder and sexual, system, by all means, what's really important is that you should know that there is a whole specialty of pelvic floor health out there. There is a whole specialty of pelvic floor health where they assess everything. They will help for you to relax certain musculature that might be overactive, because a lot of times when you've had like surgery, GYN surgery or prostate cancer surgery, like there are certain muscles that constantly are overactive because it's a protective mechanism, and it's hard to relax that. But with that causes sexual or bowel and bladder dysfunction. On the other hand, you can also have a lot of musculature that is so weakened from, all of the procedures and all the interventions like radiation and surgery, like maybe nerves were cut. And because they were so, they weren't stimulated for so long that by the time that the nerves recovered, you now have like incontinence, and you think that, that's just something that you're gonna have to live with. Definitely not always the case. And there are some cases where the damage is so is irreversible, but you don't know, like until you've seen a pelvic floor specialist and you've worked with them and you've totally you were able to rehab your pelvic floor, you don't know. And so basically, dysfunction of any kind in the pelvic floor, please ask your lymphedema therapist to see if they just so happen to be like a pelvic floor specialist as well, in which case they'll also integrate that into their plan of care with you. Or they will refer out to somebody who does specialize in this. I would like to say, and I could be wrong, I don't know of occupational therapists that do. I don't think that this falls under the practice, but definitely it's under the scope of practice for physical therapists. Physical therapists are very much, this is within their scope of practice, and they can totally focus on this area for you. But nonetheless, ask for a referral, bring the concerns to your team. In other words, when you go to see your doctor, don't be afraid to say, hey doc, I haven't had sex in 5 years and I would like to again. And, I don't know how to do what I need to do to get back into that. And so you tell your doctor, I need help, refer me to a specialist where I can get things going again. Or you can say, hey, I pee on myself every time I sneeze, and I really don't want to anymore. And so please refer me to a specialist that can help me with this. So basically, the main message is you don't just be quiet. It's like having open communication with this very delicate area of the body is very important, because if you are silent, then you'll suffer silently, and we won't be able to help you. And for any of the clinicians who are out there on the webinar right now, or will be watching a recording of this webinar, please make sure that if you're working with a patient that has lower extremity lymphedema, that you do a little bit of a screen and you say, hey, how is your bowel and bladder? Do you have any incontinence? Do you have any sexual dysfunction? And if so, no worries. I'm gonna refer you to a specialist. Sometimes patients are not going to volunteer that information, and it's going to be important for you to ask that and draw that out of the patient. And sometimes, I think that it's really tricky to ask that, on the spot. Some patients are just, especially if they are several years out of their, intervention, they've had this negative feeling around the whole situation that they don't really want to talk about. And if you ask them on the spot, they might not have the courage to say the truth at that moment. So sometimes what's really helpful is if you have it on your intake form. And if you ask on paper, do you have any sexual dysfunction? Do you have any bowel and bladder dysfunction? Because sometimes on paper, it's a little bit easier for people to express themselves than to have a face-to-face conversation. You know, and even then, sometimes the pressure's on there, like thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to go to my medical records and everybody's going to see it. But, you know, just make sure that you vet that out as a clinician, just to make sure that you can do the best for your patient. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand this over to, I forgot who's doing the wheel now. Is it Alyssa? Alyssa, no, it's Jennifer. So sorry. Jennifer Williams, who is our continuing education manager, has the wheel. So she's going to share the screen and she's going to say who our winner is.
Here we go. Monica.
Congratulations, Monica. All right, Monica. So let's see. Is it our, let's see, Monica Stalter. Okay, so Monica, if you can please make sure that you get Christy's email there. And Bob, do you have any parting words to offer our attendees tonight?
Well, thank you, everybody. I just wanted to mention one thing we forgot to mention is that swell spots can be washed and dried up to 500 times. So they actually will last a really, really long time. Obviously, if they get really, really soiled, they might not last that long, but still, they definitely, it's a microfiber on there that doesn't really hold any odor or staining much. So you can definitely use them for a long, long time. And it's just machine wash on warm water with a hypoallergenic detergent and then dry on a medium dryer. So that's all I have to say, but thanks everybody. I appreciate you taking the time. And Jeannette, I learned a lot today, honestly, so.
I'm glad. I hope that everybody who was in attendance and anybody who's watching this recording will be saying the same thing at the end. But thank you so much for your time and attention. Like I always say, you have so many other choices in terms of how you could spend your Sunday evening, right? It is Sunday. I've been doing this every day, so all the days just kind of blend in. You have so many other choices in terms of how you can spend your Sunday evening, and thank you for choosing to spend it with us. So thank you so much. Good night from New York.